I'm Jasmine Matani, the only child of Riz Matani, my dad. Fortunately, I was given a lot of freedom both economically and politically while growing up. My mom and dad read to me stories at bedtime. Books were my solace. I didn't have to go through the many struggles which the past presented, but my dad did, and he taught me education is supreme. So today, I'm introducing my dad, who has an interesting spoken history. He immigrated from India 25 years ago on August 10, 1986.
Hi everybody, this is Riz Mithani. I'm Jasmine's dad. Let me start right at the beginning. I was born in 1965 in the city of Bombay. Bombay is one of the largest cities in India. My father at that time was a lecturer in economics and my mother was a housewife. That's fairly common in India, even now as it was then. My grandmother, in fact, had brought up my father single-handedly because she was divorced when my dad was only 4 years old. So they had left the village on a train and had come to Bombay, and she brought him up, like I said, on her own. So we were not well-to-do at all at that time. In fact, we lived in a single room. That room had the kitchen, it served as the living room, it served as the bedroom, everything rolled into one. It must be about, I would say, 120 square feet. In fact, my cradle was hanging from the ceiling up at the top, like you see this light here. But below that was the bed, and my parents actually slept on the bed right below my cradle. So you can imagine how small that room was. As I grew up, I had more siblings. I had a brother and a sister. So when we were three of us at that time and I was 4 years old, we lived in a slightly bigger place, about 200 square feet, which had two rooms, one bedroom, and then the living room still had the bathroom and the kitchen right inside there. As we needed a bigger place, we moved into a two-level place in the city, which no doubt it was bigger, but the problem with that was that it was actually in the chawl system. When I say the chawl system, what it means is that we had to share the toilets and the bathrooms. They would be outside. So in our case, we had 10 tenants, and between those 10 tenants, we had 4 toilets and 2 bathrooms, which we had to actually share. And the neighborhood we lived in was also fairly rough. It was infested by criminal gangs. The children of the members of this criminal gang were my classmates, many of them. They used to go to the same Catholic school that I went to. One of my classmates' brother, when I was in 9th grade, or 9th standard as we called it there, he was arrested on charges of murder. And there was a very dramatic rescue that happened in the courthouse nearby, which you see only in the movies. So that's the kind of neighborhood I lived in, but I was concentrated always on my education and studies, just like my dad wanted me to do, which helped me later on in life. From a historical perspective, in 1971 there was the India-Pakistan war. The reason for this war was that during the partition, what the British government had done was, when they separated India into India and Pakistan, there was East Pakistan on the east side and there was West Pakistan on the west side. So, but the Pakistan was ruled by West Pakistan and East Pakistan wanted to get independent. So with the help of Soviet Union, India was actually siding East Pakistan to become independent at that point, and they wanted to be liberated. The West Pakistan was not very happy about that, so they did airstrikes in December of 1971 in the states of Punjab, Haryana and the Jammu Kashmir area. And that resulted into a war for about 2 weeks. That time was very scary. As a child of 6 years old, during the night, I could see outside there were fighter planes. You could see these lights, and we were told that these fighter planes were actually looking to throw bombs in populated areas. So what we had to do was we had to cover our windows with brown paper. And then at night we would not actually have our lights on, we would use candlelight. And so what it would appear from the top to the fighter pilots was that there was no population here because the whole city would be really dark at that point. And you would ask, why did we cover it with brown paper? Simple reason. We did not have curtains at that time. Like I said, we were not very well to do. But anyway, also another thing that happened was in schools, right? It would be like, get down, and then we would all be supposed to get under the desk in case there was an air raid warning. We were drilled to hide under the desk, and this was supposed to protect us in case there was a bomb dropped or something like that. It sounds kind of funny at this time, but at that time it was really, really scary. The other major event that happened during that time was the emergency. This was in 1975. The ruling party at that time, the Congress party, wanted the population to believe that the reason for the emergency was that there was still foreign threat, and by foreign threat we really mean threat from Pakistan. But the real reason was that there was a lot of election fraud at that time that happened, and the opposition party had raised a lot of voice against the ruling party. And what the ruling party Congress did was took all the opposition leaders and put them in jail and gave them no trial. The IIT are the premier engineering institutes in India, and about 90,000 students appeared that year. This was back in 1982, and I was in the top 2,000. You had to be that way so that you could get admitted to one of the institutes, and I ended up going to IIT Bombay to study chemical engineering at that point. IIT was an interesting place. This is where I learned a lot. I learned about life. I learned how to be independent. I developed friendships at that point, which also lasted a long time. But it also was a very stressful period of time. This was because, we were all toppers from our own high schools. If we were not toppers, we were in the top 1 to 5% of our school. And now here we were competing in our courses against these people. So obviously some of us had to be less, capable than others. And that was very dejecting. One other reason that compounded it was because there was relative grading, or what it is known here as grading on the curve. So people would not help you, in your studies, because they would believe by helping you that their grades would get affected. So there was some of that going on too. So although it was a stressful period, it was still a very fun and enjoyable period. So there was kind of a dichotomy there. What most people don't realize is the underemployment rate. There is a little bit of underemployment in the United States, but in India it's very compounded. It can be almost about, if your unemployment rate is about 7 to 8%, you're talking about 5 times more, so about 35 to 40% underemployment, which means people are much more qualified than the job they're doing. They may have a master's degree or doctor's degree, but they're working for somebody who some kind of a job which only maybe requires a high school or a bachelor's degree. So looking at my dad himself, he was a lecturer of economics, like I said, in a small time college. He had already published 10 textbooks, but he was not able to get into a bigger college or get promoted into roles of being a associate professor or a professor. So now let's come back to what I was doing at IIT. In my final year we had campus interviews, and at that point I was applying for jobs. The job I got was with a company which wanted me to essentially be a programmer. Now that I found very interesting because I had qualified myself to be a chemical engineer. So I thought I would get a job, inside a oil or gas company or a pharmaceutical company or a chemical manufacturer, where I could use my qualifications, which the government has actually spent money, because it subsidized education, but that did not happen. So that's kind of an effect of unemployment. I also felt that there was nepotism There was a couple of jobs that I did not get, and I feel the people who got those jobs was because they already knew somebody in that company somehow, so they were related from a friend or a network perspective. Well, in any case, I had already applied for graduate schools in the United States. I had applied to about 11 graduate schools, and I got admitted to 7 of them. 5 of them did not matter because there were only 2 of them that offered me an assistantship. An assistantship would mean that I would get money. That was necessary. I could not have come on my own and paid my own tuition, etc. I was admitted to Michigan Tech and to Kansas State. And the reason I went to Kansas State was because somebody told me that Kansas State was, not as cold as Michigan. But they were obviously wrong because Kansas was. The winters were very bitter cold out there. It wasn't like California where it's beautiful warm weather almost throughout the year. I was doing my master's. The difference I found between like a top tier university, which was IIT in India, and a second tier university like Kansas State was in the professors here. They actually wanted you to think as opposed to just memorize and learn. So I found that attitude quite different and refreshing. Also, in terms of equipment and facilities in the labs, there was no comparison, right? In a country like India, even at IIT, we had to share computing equipment. There were not as many lab facilities, whereas here we had the latest equipment, the latest computing power. We were able to have our own computer terminals which we could go work on, etc. So great opportunity there. The other part was, let's talk about the reception I kind of received. The Kansas is in the Bible Belt of the United States, very largely Christian evangelical community. That welcomed me with open arms. They wanted to understand what kind of culture I came from and wanted me to become part of their culture. So that was great. The other aspect of this was sometimes you did feel that, for a few dollars an hour, being such intellectually qualified, you had to work so hard in the labs, to satisfy the grants which were given to the universities, etc. That was not as bad as also feeling a little bit discriminated and slighted compared to the white students. So the foreign students, for example, were expected that you would actually work through your Thanksgiving break as well as through spring break. There was no such expectations from the white foreign students. But overall, it was a great experience. Long way to come from Bombay to Kansas.
Okay, so that was an amazing journey from Bombay to Kansas. In all, I will probably study more. Would you like to state anything else?
Absolutely. It's quite a fascinating journey, really. I'd like to kind of close it by saying that 65 years ago, like I was saying, when my grandmother went from her village with her 4-year-old to Bombay, she did not even have money for a train ticket. She actually had to borrow that money, right? And that's where the whole education thing started. She did not speak English at that time. She could not read English at that time. But what she would do is she would take the English nursery rhymes which were written in her Gujarati script, and then she would teach the kindergarten students how to say those nursery rhymes. That's where my dad got his grounding in education was important. He became a lecturer in economics after doing his master's. All of us, my siblings, essentially, got ourselves educated. I have 2 master's degrees. One of my sisters is a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences. The other 2 have bachelor's degrees. One of them is an engineer. So we've come a long way from not having really anything 65 years ago as a family, as a Mithani family, to now where all of us are well educated, well placed, we have good jobs, we own cars, we own property, we live in different parts of the world. So yes, we have come a long way, and I would again reiterate, like you said in the beginning, education is the key if you want to rise from lower levels of economic society and you want to get better.